All right, it's been a few days and the meta has finally settled in Wild, so now I think that it's pretty appropriate to talk about what the best decks in the game right now are. I think Tempo Storm is usually almost always correct on their placements. Sometimes the card inclusions they have in the decks are a bit iffy, I will be honest, but you're usually going to be best off listening to what Tempo Storm says, especially if you want to find a deck easily. Never, ever, ever trust what HS Replay says for stats, for decks, for anything about Wild. Actually a completely useless resource. But yeah, let's get into it. So, of course, if you don't know, Tempo Storm is a website where they have a Hearthstone meta snapshot report. They do it usually every week or every 2 weeks. I'm actually not sure. I can check really quickly. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, it's loading. Wow. Yeah, every few weeks to a month is when they put it out. And usually they will do one right after a mini set comes out or an expansion a little bit after to get a foothold of where you can expect decks to be. Now, this is the list so far. As you can see, tier 1 all the way to tier 3. They have 22 decks on here, but a big thing about Tempo Storm is that they will put one deck for every single class on their tier list. So when you see these bottom decks like Mechathune Warrior, even Unholy Death Knight, and Aggro Demon Hunter, these are probably not actually tier 3 decks. However, it's what the Tempo Storm team believes are the best decks for those classes, so they at least wanted them to be represented. Now, we can start at the top, and yep, this is the issue. Rogue, 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 then Hunter, which is nice, actually. Hunter finally has a really good deck, and then Reno Paladin. We can look at these decks and see what they're all about. This is Miracle Rogue. It's the Pack Miracle Rogue deck. Where is the pack? There's Twisted Pack, Hip Hop, Swindle, Wild Pod Null, Arcane Giant. Yeah, this is easily the best deck in the game. If you've played it at all, you'll understand why. It's so disgusting. If you played against it, you're just... When a deck can make 2/3/5s on turn 1, it's a broken deck. When a deck can make 2/8/8s on turn 3 pretty consistently, it's a broken deck. It's just unreal what this deck does to the game, and it's crazy. Number 2 is Garrote Rogue. This deck is a hybrid sort of aggro combo deck. You're a little bit less hyper aggro than Pirate Rogue, of course, because you're not running as many pirates. Your deck is a little more spell focused to cycle through your deck, but you will play a big board of early pirates using Treasure Distributor, obviously Brigand, Patches, Jolly Roger, and Toy Boat to cycle through your deck. Then you have Street Trickster and Garrote. Once your deck is empty, or even if you have some cards in your deck, but if you still draw cards, you can play Street Trickster, double Garrote, and then if you draw every single Garrote, it deals 32 damage. If you play it with Shadow of Demise, it'll deal 48, so you can kill through Renathal and a little bit of armor. And this deck is also incredibly powerful. I will admit, it is a little bit harder than both it's definitely harder than Pirate Rogue, but it's a little bit harder than Miracle Rogue. I don't believe Miracle Rogue is that difficult of a deck to begin with, but I have to preface that because I've seen so many people try and play this deck and then be actually unbelievably terrible at it. So I do think it's worth mentioning that this deck is quite good, but it is not the easiest deck in the world. It's very simple though. Once you play a few games, you will understand how to play it. I recommend playing this deck mainly because it's a lot more fun than Miracle Rogue and Pirate Rogue. I recommend playing this one the most if you want to play a broken Rogue deck, but it is there. Number 3, of course, is Pirate Rogue. The deck is pretty simple. It looks a lot like Garrote Rogue, except you actually aren't running as many spells or the Garrote combo, so you can fit in better minions and better lethality, from your cards, such as Swordfish, Dread Corsair, Ship's Cannon, Cold Blood, Hip Hop, Deckhand, and Ziliax. Those are the main differences between the two decks. This one, of course, is a board flood deck. You're going to dump your whole hand as soon as you can, build a wide board, get your Ziliax out, and then try and kill your opponent before turn 4 or 5. This deck is incredibly powerful because Treasure Distributor is one of the most overpowered cards ever buffed. This card should not have been buffed, I don't care if you're trying to make the argument that it would make Pirates better in Standard. It didn't, and all it did was make Wild unbelievable for fucking aggro. But yeah, of course, those are the top 3 Rogue decks, the top 3 decks in the game. Who could have guessed that, give Rogue as many broken tools as it can, and then it would be great. Then at number 4, you have Egg Hunter. I don't like that name. I think it should be called Huron Hunter because Egg Hunter is a completely different deck. This is a list popularized by Tom Carter. It's actually up here. It's a Renathal list, so you can actually... Yeah, finish Renathal site there. Sorry. So you can actually survive versus aggro. It's pretty straightforward, actually, once you play a few games. You want to be discounting your Meat Wagon or your Mystery Egg in some way. Meat Wagon only pulls Mystery Egg from your deck. You can use Carrion Studies. You can use... Oh, the coins aren't in this deck. That's interesting. Last time I saw this list, I actually ran the coin guys. So it's Carrion Studies. You can draw Carrion Study from your Trinket Tracker, get your Egg or Meat Wagon to be cheaper, play it. You can trigger its Death Rattle with Play Dead, Devouring Swarm, Trim, Crescent, which are cards you want. Then you'll pull the Egg from your deck. If it dies, you're not that upset because you have 9 lives to trigger its effect again. You can get the Egg back. But then you can get multiple Mok'Nathal Lions, clear your opponent's board over and over again, build a board through Princess Huron to have minions that aren't going to need to be traded off to build a wide board. There is a Tundra Rhino in the ETC. Do not run Tundra Rhino main deck. It's not worth the inconsistency of sometimes hitting Tundra Rhino just for the high roll of maybe you can get the charge on like turn 5. It's not worth it. You're going to have an infinite board from now. You basically have an infinite board once you set it up, aside from silences, transforms, or if you just, I don't know, suck at the game, because the deck is not that hard, I will be honest. It has Defense Attorney Nathanos in it, actually, as another way to get Mystery Egg like on the board in case you have or don't have 9 lives. The Nathanos is a little iffy, in my opinion. Like, it's fine. It's probably fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but if you don't own it, you don't need it. Don't think about crafting Thanos if you don't need it or if you don't own it already. Theotar, actually, in the ETC is a good card for it anyway. But yeah, this deck is very good. Tom Carter hit rank 1 with it, if I remember correctly. It's very, very, very powerful. The deck does play itself. Once you play maybe 1 or 2 games, you'll figure out how to play it completely. I recommend this if you're looking for a board-based deck that is really good into other board-based decks. You basically win the game in any board-based matchups playing this deck. It's really fun, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, this is probably the best Hunter deck we've had in a long, long, long time, which is really funny because like a week or 2 before this deck was discovered, I was complaining that Hunter fucking sucked in Wild, which it did. Not including this deck, Hunter is pretty bad in Wild, but yeah. And then lastly, of the decks I'm going to showcase from this tier list is going to be Reno Paladin at the 5th place. Reno Paladin is really good because if you look right here, it has great matchups into Rogue and Shadow Priest, especially. It's not very good into a lot of like slower decks like Egg Hunter, Quest Mage. Actually, it says right here, Reno Druid, Reno Shaman. It's pretty bad into Questline Warlock, which is obviously a very popular deck, and it completely loses to Reno Priest. Playing this deck into Reno Priest is like bashing your head into a wall. It's actually so abysmal. Anyone that's played it will tell you that. It's kind of funny. But the deck is very straightforward. This is the best control deck that we've had in Wild in a long time. It's a true control deck, unlike other things like, Shutterwalk Shaman, which isn't a control deck, no matter what anyone tries to tell you. You actually are able to run Kingor's Endless Army in this deck because of Ziliax. You run the Virus Perfect module Ziliax, which is, quoted as Unkiliax in Standard. It's really good with the Kangor as well as your Leviathan. Gives you a lot of value to just grind out rogues into the later games, grind out a lot of decks. I don't recommend playing this deck if you are light on dust, especially. There's a lot of legendaries, or if you have time constraints. If you're just, I don't think it's fun. I think this is one of the least fun decks that you could play right now, personally. But that's on me. It's running a lot of tech cards for the Rogue matchups, like Galloping Savior and Hidden Wisdom, and they're great against Rogue, of course. Then the top end, of course, is Reno Lone Ranger, Prismatic Beam, Lightforge Carriel, things like that. You have to be very careful not to get your Carriel weapon removed by a Zephyrus in a lot of matchups, so make sure that you don't play it before your opponent has played their own Zephyrus. But yeah, this deck is very, very, very powerful, and it is the best control deck in the game right now. Now, I'm not going to go through the actual decks for the other cards, or I can't talk, the other ranked decks in the list, but I will talk about them lightly. Reno Shaman is very powerful. It's pretty good in the early game against these scam decks like, Rogue, of course, and Egg Hunter especially. It outgrinds Reno Paladin, outgrinds a lot of other decks because, it's Shutterwalk. It is a combo deck. You are trying to play your big Shutterwalk on board, lock your opponent out of playing the game through Lotheb, Bully, and Reno Lone Ranger to make it so that they can't play any cards, and it's very straightforward. Aggro Priest, it's Shadow Priest, it's very straightforward. You just shoot your opponent in the face, you play your Void Touch Attendant, and you try and go face. Kingsbane Rogue, it's as simple as it comes. You want to buff the weapon and go face. This deck is it's a really rough matchup for a lot of slower decks. So if you are playing a lot of slower decks in your pocket, Kingsbane Rogue is really good. You have to worry about people that are running Sticky Finger in their ETC, but most people don't do that. I do it personally because I hate Kingsbane Rogue and I want them Kingsbane players to suffer, but that's me. It's not that great in aggro unless you can get your Blade Flurry, but even then, it's not amazing. Sometimes, though, it is worthwhile to buff your own hero power weapon just for a Blade Flurry turn. Don't be afraid to do that into aggro. It's definitely necessary. Reno Druid, it's basically the same as Reno Shaman, except it's a little less consistent into aggro. It's not great in aggro, is all I can really say. Quest Mage is very degenerate. You have a bunch of different versions. You have Ignite Mage. You have... Actually, the Ignite version is the best one. If you are looking for an APM deck to play, this one is something you can do. It's a fine deck. It's not good in aggro, of course, but that's what you expect from a deck like this. It is very fun, though. And then you have Tier 3. Questline Warlock, it's abysmal into almost all of these decks. It's terrible, terrible, terrible into aggro. It's terrible into anti-rogue decks that run a lot of neutral tech cards because it just gets hit by those same ones that hit rogue. It's not very good. I don't recommend playing Questline Warlock at all. It really has so many bad matchups. It's just people refuse to play around it properly, so it gets a lot of free wins, and it does have an inevitability factor against a lot of these decks like Reno Paladin. Not really, I guess kind of Reno Druid and Reno Shaman, but not really, to be honest, because you can still just lose through the tech options in Shaman and Druid just killing you, but that is a thing. Big Shaman is a deck you have to watch out for on ladder. It's like it has the same weaknesses as decks like Miracle Rogue, Egg Hunter, and Giants Warlock, but it has a lot more explosive power, and the fact that it can kill you on like turn 4 if they high roll. It's very powerful. It's something that you have to watch out for. If you're playing something like Reno Priest, which is a deck that I love a lot, it's actually the next one on the list, you can have to worry about things like Mass Hysteria, things like Puppet Theater, things like Hysteria itself. Yeah. And then we get to Reno Priest. This deck can win every single matchup above it if you tech correctly, if you play correctly, if you tempo king your opponent and make sure that you out-tempo all these decks. It's very hard to do so, but you can win every matchup against any deck in the game playing Reno Priest. I know that sounds like a big thing, but it's not really consistent. I am doing very well in Reno Priest. I'm currently 27-7 with the deck right now. It's very good. My list, I'm not going to show that one because I don't want people to know the tech that I'm running if I run into them. But you can run things like Puppet Theater for Big Shaman. Hysteria is also for Big Shaman. It's good against Warlock. It's good against Miracle. It's good against Egg Hunter. You can run Shadowward Ruin, which, again, good against all those decks. There's a lot of different tech options you can run. It's standard, just Raza ping deck, and it's very, very fun to play. Obviously, you can look at all these decks yourself on Tempo Storm. I'm just going through a little rundown of them for people that don't know. Then you have Togwaggle Druid. This is a deck that Dane was playing, actually, pretty highly, I saw. I'm not a fan of this deck. I've literally yet to lose to it, but it's something. It's Dorian with Juicy Psych Melon, and then you can get Togwaggle as Alina shenanigans, and your opponent can't really play any cards afterwards. But it's not super consistent. You have to get to something. You have to get to like 8-9 mana. It's very weak to aggro. It's weak to disruption. It's weak to if your opponent already has their combo pieces. It's not that good of a deck, in my opinion. I wouldn't recommend playing it, but it's something you can do. Treant Druid. This deck is actually really cool right now. You can build a super wide scam board that are of like 6/6s on turn 3 pretty consistently using things like Cultivation. Overgrown Beanstalk card draws you 1 million cards. It's really fun. KVLT built this deck. It's been somewhat perfected recently, where you're not running Arcane Giants, but you are running Fungal Fortunes, or maybe Mark of the Lotus. I personally run one Mark, one Fungal instead of Arcane Giants, but it's still a very powerful deck. Woo! Even Shaman, everyone knows what Even Shaman is. It's the Hero Power Pass deck. You have all these totems, you buff them. Sometimes you can play 0-mana Pyroblast and kill your opponent on like turn 5. It's really powerful. Totemic Might is a really powerful card. Keep it in your mulligan no matter what you do. You want to build a wide board, Totemic Might it, and then your opponent can't clear it. You have a lot of trading power due to your healing totem. It's just very powerful. I have no idea what Potion Priest is, so I'm not even going to pretend. One sec, I'm going to look at this. Oh, Potion Priest is just Inner Fire Priest, but they rely on the freaking Potion of Madness. Why is it not just called Inner Fire Priest? I don't know. It's standard Inner Fire Priest for using Potion of Madness and your Radiant Elementals and Anduin's Gift, Bless, all that kind of stuff, to steal a minion from your opponent, send it into their face on early turns, like turn 4, sometime, or 5. It's going to be a huge minion, kill your opponent. It's not anything crazy. Alex Rogue is a combo rogue deck that uses the shell of like Scabs, Shark, etc., all this stuff to bounce an Alexstrasza over and over again on early turns, dealing damage to your opponent's face. It's very powerful if you are good at it. I don't recommend playing this for a new player at all. It takes a lot of games to get good at, and it's not that great. It's pretty weak into aggro, but it's okay, I guess. It's incredibly weak to disruption in every form, but it is a deck that you can play. Miracle Priest is like Miracle Rogue, and you're gonna get your giant wide board of Grave Horrors or very large Radiant Elementals, and then you just eventually end the turn with a big board. Your opponent can't really clear it because you can do it on like turn 3 or 4, and then you just kill your opponent. And then you get to the last 3 decks that are just, they're not good decks, but they are the best deck for these 3 classes according to Tempo Storm. I'm actually going to cover these ones because I don't even know what's going to be in them, to be honest, so I want to see. Mecha'thun Warrior looks like this. It's using Chemical Spill to pull the Mecha'thun from the deck. Then you have Shield Shatter with... Where is Buckler? Okay, there's no Buckler in this deck. That's interesting. Anyway, you gain a lot of armor through the Risky Skipper combo, where you have Skipper, Armorsmith, Razorfen Rockstar, Ancient Totem, Target Dummy, and then Roaring Applause, draw a million cards, gain a lot of armor, survive through the game from the depths to reduce the cost of cards in your deck. You can Chemical Spill the Mecha'thun. Then, as long as you have enough armor for a Shield Shatter, it'll die. You have to play out all the minions in your hand, cards in your hand, which isn't the easiest part. Magma Rager hit 120 with it. Good job for that, Magma. But it's a pretty good deck. It's not amazing, don't get me wrong. It's something you can play, and it is probably the best warrior deck. But yeah, I definitely feel like I should be covering these more off-meta ones. Then you have even Unholy Death Knight. This list is actually using Sing-Along Buddy, which is something that I was doing pretty when the card came out for Knife Juggler to get a lot of push on your opponent. The issue with this deck is it would have been a very powerful deck as a Reno deck counter, but because of the change to the new Reno cards, Highlander cards, they all ignore shuffle effects in your deck, so it's not very good anymore. It's still a fine deck, and it's definitely the best Death Knight deck, no question, but it's fine. This is actually a pretty good list. Martians played it, but this is almost entirely the list that I was playing day 1 of the expansion. So, what the heck? No, it's just a very powerful list. It's not very hard to decide what cards go into the deck, but it is very fun. I personally love this deck, so if you are looking for a very easy, very fun aggro deck to play, you should play this. And then you have Aggro Demon Hunter from Doc the Light posted this. I have not seen this at all on ladder. It's probably fine. It doesn't look anything egregious about it. It's using the new card Sock Puppet to gain, a lot of attack, hit your opponent in the face. It's probably not the worst thing in the world. I'm going to be honest with you. There are explanations on the side if you need anything for any of these decks. This one you probably will need because I'm not too sure what it's good into. It doesn't have it's not popular enough to have a matchup spread, mainly because, like I said, it's probably not very good. But it looks fun. You can use a lot of new fun cards like Parched Desperado. Of course, Sock Puppet Slither Spear. It's using a very powerful card, Mana Burn, which makes it so you can actually defend your board against other aggro decks, against control decks, against removal, against anything, or shut down your opponent's very powerful turns. Mana Burn is one of the best cards in the entire game, so it really is good when a deck is able to use it. I'm probably going to play this literally after I'm done recording this, because this is really cool. But yeah, I like this deck. You guys should probably check it out too. But yeah, this is the breakdown of the meta, the best decks in the wild right now. If you enjoy, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think down below. Which of these is your favorite decks, which one is your least favorite. Make sure to go to Tempo Storm to check all these out. I'm not sponsored or anything, but I still think Tempo Storm is the best resource for wild, and something you should check out to see what good decks are, what you should be thinking you're going to play versus a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Rising again!
Darker than they've ever been.